you are here to basically write a book. You're here to write a book, and so the best way to get out of here is to view every single thing that you're doing as something in service of writing a book.
What's up, y'all? Welcome to another video of Tea Time with Letitia. And in today's video, I am drinking Tulsi Moringa Tea. And moringa is actually really good for helping with mood disorders, and it actually has some benefits to liver health as well. In today's video, I have a special guest, and I'm going to let him introduce himself and his drink. Now, he is drinking something a little bit different than the tea today, but I'll make an exception for him.
How you doing? Hi, my name is Gabriel Green. I am a third-year PhD student, dual title PhD student in the English department. My dual title is in English and African American and African Diaspora Studies, where I study African American rhetoric and the rhetorical traditions as it relates to artistic things like poetry and poetry slams and things of that nature. In addition to that, I am a musician. I'm a poet. I past president of Black Graduate Student Association and coach for the Penn State National Championship Words CUPSI Poetry Slam team. My drink for today is cranberry juice. It's a little bit different, like she said, but I'm drinking cranberry juice because it is rich in antioxidants and it is good for the kidneys, and so that's my drink for today.
Okay, I am a fan of cranberry juice myself, so hey, drinks up. So today we're going to get into talking about some things specifically related to graduate school, that being materials and being able to read through your articles in your discipline and being able to focus your research based upon those articles. So I'm going to let Gabe talk a little bit more about the importance of being able to read through your materials in your discipline.
Yeah, so being able to like read, you know, is one of the things that I wish I would have been more knowledgeable of as I was coming into grad school. Starting out, right, in the English department and in African American studies as well, a lot of the materials that we're going to read are always going to be books, right? There's going to be some articles, there's going to be different things that you can read, but predominantly a lot of times it's going to be books and then articles and then, you know, so on and so forth. One of the things that I struggled with for a while was like keeping up with the reading during seminars, right? Because a lot of times it's easy to, you know, you have 300 pages worth of books to read per seminar. 3 seminars is like over 900, maybe even 1,000 words, right? Sometimes that's on the high end, but you would have like a lot of pages to read over basically a short period of time. And one of the things that I struggled with was keeping on top of that. And part of the reason why I struggled with that was because I didn't know how to read strategically. And had I known that, I would have been much more efficient in terms of how I was reading, in terms of how much material I was reading, in terms of like how much I was remembering from each of those texts. And so one of the things that I eventually learned, right, and I didn't really learn it until I got to comprehensive exams, which is a little bit late, but we got there anyway.
Better late than never.
Better late than never. That is the truth. And so one of the things that I learned was each book or each article or each section of a chapter that you're trying to read, for you and your purposes, right, as a student, they're only going to have like but so much material that is going to be useful to you, right? In some cases, there's going to be a lot of things that you can take out of there, but the thing is, like, every single word and every single page is not necessarily going to be useful to you. You want to read everything, but in terms of how hard you read it or how intently you take notes on it is not, you know, it's not going to be pertinent to try to take, copious notes on like every single detailed word. And so the way that I learned to do that was think about, you know, whatever so if you're in a class and the theme that week is, I don't know, Platonic rhetoric, right? And I'm going to read these, you know, rhetorical text, right? I need to read it and find whatever the central argument is, because usually a lot of articles and a lot of books, they usually state that early on, right? And articles is going to be in the abstract or a few pages or a few paragraphs in, right? In a book, it's usually going to be the introduction. And so I'm going to read those things super, super close. I'm going to find out like what the central argument is or what the central nugget that I need to take from this is. And once I find out like what I need to look for, right? So if it's a section in the article or if it's a particular chapter in a book that's talking about something that is very interesting to me or very pertinent to whatever project that I'm working on, I'm going to jump straight there. And so it starts reading very hard and intently, right? Those opening sections, the introduction, the abstracts, first couple pages, you know, things of that nature. I'm going to read those super close. And then once I read those super close, a lot of times they're going to tell you like what the preceding text is going to be about. And so if I know that much, if I know the introduction well, which in a book, right, a scholarly book or a scholarly monograph, an introduction on the long end would be about 30 pages. But a lot of times it can, you know, vary in between there, somewhere between 15 to 30 pages. If I read those 15 to 30 pages super hard, I can find the chapter that I need most to read and jump straight to that chapter. And that chapter is another 30 or 40 pages. And now I've synthesized, right, what I need to take from this particular book, 40, you know, 400 pages or 300 pages down to like 100 pages or 70 pages. And it makes it a bit more manageable. And the same thing goes for
I'm gonna cut you off really quick right there. I think that this is a very important skill that students should come to understand very early on. And so I'm in the sciences, right? So most of the stuff that we read is articles, journal articles. We don't necessarily read textbooks or books per se unless we're trying to get background knowledge or background information or further understand a concept. But just figuring out like what is in that article and figuring out the so for us we would look for looking within the abstract, because we use abstracts as well, but we look for the hypothesis, the conclusion, and whatever claim that they're making, and then from there we go on to figure out what's within the paper. But yeah, it took me a little bit to really figure out, because I know for myself for a while I would just be looking at these papers and reading them and being like, what am I supposed to take from this? Like, this is nothing but a bunch of words on paper. Like, how do I know what's important within this? So yeah, yes, Gabe, yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's super important.
You said that you figured this out a bit later in the game than you would have liked to. What facilitated you in figuring it out when you did? And then my second question is, how could you have figured it out earlier?
Yeah, so I mean, the answer to both of those is kind of like a two-parter, right? On the one hand, it's like not hard-headed, but just like not catching the hint, right? Because a lot of these things, right, I was getting told, but it just wasn't clicking. And so like trying to be more attentive and then actually trying to implement things as they're like given to me sooner. That's the first thing. And the thing that kind of like insinuate or like brought it about was once I was doing comprehensive exams and I'm looking at, right, some, I don't know, 150 to 200 items that I need to read, or I need to read, right? Looking at those items and like, okay, I need to read all this stuff. I don't know how I'm going to get through all of this material. How do I do that? And so once I was in that process, like it kind of forced me to learn that skill pretty fast, right? And so I was paying attention to, you know, things easier, right? My notes were a bit clearer, and everything, because I was up against a deadline. And also like planning it out, right? And so the year that I was going through comp, so this would have been, I think, last year, right? So starting in the beginning of last year, that year was one of the first years that I was super meticulous about actually planning a schedule and actually like designating and delegating my time accordingly. And that also helped because by delegating my time and saying, all right, by this 3-month quarter, I want to have so many books read. And then by the next quarter, I want to have so many books read. Doing that, those are the things that kind of like brought that to happen.
Okay. Two things that stuck out to me as you were talking. The first thing was like it not clicking. Like I found that I don't know, for some reason, like the example that's coming to my mind now is like I didn't understand the difference between a bachelor's and a master's degree until probably halfway through my undergrad. So like my junior year, I came to realize, okay, when I graduate, I'm going to get a bachelor's degree to where like I could like say it and really understand it. And I was talking to my dad, just, telling him about how, I didn't realize this or I didn't realize that. And he was like, really? We used to talk about, you going and you're getting your bachelor's and this, that, and the third. And I was like, it just didn't click. Like we could have talked about it. You could have told me this, but something just wasn't, it just kept going right over my head. And it finally clicked after a little bit. And so now I'm getting, like you said, better about really paying attention and implementing and integrating thoughts and conversations so that like I'm actually hearing it and conceptualizing the information as it's coming to me.
Right.
And talking about, being able to read these articles, being able to understand what you're reading. How has, this process of learning how to read and then learning how to delegate your time efficiently, how has all of that kind of helped you to focus yourself within your research and getting to that end goal?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think I can break this down to like 2 ways, right? And a lot of them come from, my advisor in a way, right? So literally like my advisor, Dr. Keith Gilliard of the English department. He's an Edwin Earl and professor of English, right? And I think he's currently the DGS of African American Studies. But all that said, right, there were 2 main things that, I had heard from him throughout the whole time that I was here, and that it took me a while, but I finally began to kind of internalize, right? The first thing was like, as it relates to the whole purpose why we're in grad school, which is to graduate and get out. The main thing that he's always been, like preaching to me the whole time I was here was just that you are here to basically write a book. You're here to write a book. And so the best way to get out of here is to view every single thing that you're doing as something in service of writing a book. And if it's not in service of writing a book, you really need to evaluate whether or not you need to do that, right? And so that was something that was challenging for me because coming in, right, I'm a very extroverted person. And so I was trying to do all of the social things, right? Be a part of the groups, be a part of the different mentorship opportunities on top of the thing, and just like juggling everything, hitting the conferences and networking and just like having fun and doing all those things, right? And it took me a while to really establish that, like, no, everything that you're doing needs to be in service of this, right? And so that means the way I pick my classes, right? Or the professors that I want to go with, the different social things that I engage with, right? Like everything that I am doing needs to be in service of that, right? Now, obviously we're not robots, so we need to make sure that we build time to, to be a person, right? I'm not going to say just like sit in your room and just like type all day. Like that's not healthy for anyone. But like largely speaking, everything needs to be in service of that, right? And so if it's a class, right, because most programs, I would imagine, or at least in the humanities. I can't speak necessarily for the STEM, but like in the humanities, right, there's space built in there for electives, obviously. And so elective grad courses, right, shouldn't be things that are just kind of like haphazard, right? They need to be something that you can see in there, right? And even if it's something that seems like way outside of, right, your wheelhouse, right? So for example, in the English department, right, they have these prerequisite course, like these mandatory core classes that everyone has to take. Everyone has to take a course in pre-1800 lit, post-1800 lit, you know, a rhetoric course, and then third, right? I do rhetoric, and most of my rhetoric is not necessarily tied to a particular century or period. Frankly, a lot of my rhetoric that I deal with a lot of times is happening now, right, in the 21st century. Ain't a whole lot of 21st century is, right? And so that means that what I need to do then, if it's a pre-1800 course, one of the things that I did was I knew that pre-1800, right, Victorian literature probably wasn't going to be where I was, right, where I needed to be, right? So I found a Platonic rhetoric course, right, which is looking at rhetoric, which is what I do, and applied that to it. And so that's an example of that, right? Or if it's, you know, a book that you're reading in a class, again, that seems like it has absolutely nothing, right? You're looking for whatever is in that class that you can use later and say, okay, cool, I got this little bit of nugget over here. I can take that little bit from there and thank you. This is going to do well with my dissertation project, or this is going to do well with this particular class. So that's the first thing, you know, that I learned. And an addendum to that, by the way, just going back to the reading bit and how to read, another thing that my advisor was telling me was when we're reading, it's not just about reading for information. It's about also reading for aesthetic. And what he meant by that was not just reading for the information, because we have to get the information anyway. But in order to get out of here, we have to write something. And a lot of times, right, nothing is going to prepare you or teach you how to write other than like paying attention to writers. Right?
There is a certain way, depending on your field, there's a certain acceptable way of writing, and the terminology that you use, it's another language, just like you learn
another language. It's another language, and it's another skill, because in the same way that there's, you know, a certain way of writing, in those certain ways of writing, there's people who do this well, and there's people who don't. You know, and like that sounds cruel, but like that's the real of it. There's people who do it well and don't. And so when my advisor was telling me you need to like read aesthetically, is you need to be paying attention to how these, like how the good writers, you know, whoever those people are, how they're doing what they're doing. And then it's like, okay, so you set up your arguments in this particular way and you flesh out your paper, and it kind of just like follows a step-by-step process, right? That's something that, right, to this day I am yet, you know, wrestling with and learning, is like how to basically structure the argument, right? Like I'm able to write at least somewhat, because I didn't get here if I couldn't, right? But being able to take whatever I started with and then mature that up has been a bit of a struggle, because for the most part, I wasn't reading aesthetically. I wasn't reading to see, okay, well, how did this person do that, right? I get the information, but how did this person make that jump from here to here? How did they make that argument connect? How did they make that make sense? And so knowing how to like read aesthetically, and again, right, that's connected to the using every bit of like what we're doing here as something that's in service of getting us out of here. That was the first thing. Second thing that my advisor told me in terms of like what's gonna like make me be the best that I can be, is looking at like the different professionalization things that need to be done and finding ways to basically like do that and master that. The way that it's necessary for folks in the humanities, particularly in English, a lot of times that means, you know, articles, right? Published scholarship or some type of like scholarly activity. I know it's like that in some STEM fields for sure as well. Like, gotta have,
yeah. We have to publish.
So like the thing is, right, grad students are a lot of times, especially now, right, are kind of pushed to publish, right? Because the nature of what the academic field is, it's very publish or perish, right? And so, right, once we decide we're going to be at this R1 institution, that means we're basically entering into a discourse community that's going to be mostly publish or perish. Like, that's the reality, right? And some people stick to that. Some people fall by the wayside and jump off and do whatever, but that's what it is.
And with that, I hope that the viewers, you guys have gained some information that can help you graduate with gratification, some more tools to add to your toolbox. Thanks for watching.